You are listening to the SDSU Football Podcast, presented by the East Village Times, with your hosts Andre Hagverdian and Paul Garrison. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the SDSU Football Podcast. I am Andre Hagverdian, and with me, as always, is Paul Garrison. What's going on, Paul?
Nothing, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Just staying in tune with everything San Diego State football. A lot going on.
There's a ton going on. Very, very exciting time. I think, wanting to have a year-round coverage like we're doing, I think it's a great opportunity to get to know the Aztecs, and looking forward to kicking off this episode.
Yeah, we've got a great episode. As always, we have a special guest coming up later in the episode. But first, we wanted to get into follower questions. Last week, we tweeted out to our followers about any questions or topics that they would like you and I to address or answer during the podcast. And we got 9 great questions. We're going to address some of the questions on this episode, and we'll get to some of the other ones in future episodes. So if you asked a question and you don't hear it answered on this episode, don't fret. We'll get to it at some point.
And just let it be an open invitation. Keep the questions coming. We welcome them. We want them. Be able to kind of keep this as an open conversation so we can be giving the content and information that y'all are looking for.
The first question we're going to get into came from Matt. His Twitter handle is @LostBrewer. His question was, what's our secondary look like next season? It's a great question because I think the secondary had a great season this year, and a big part of that defense continuing its success is making sure the secondary is in tune next year as well. I think the first thing that jumped out to me looking at the secondary is how young they were this year. They had 3 seniors on the roster, 2 super seniors who were starters, Trent Thompson and Taylor Hawkins. The 3rd senior was Rashad Scott, it was his first senior season. And it's, to be determined whether he will be coming back for a second senior season or not. We haven't seen any updates on that. The only other departing player from the secondary was junior Alan Mawada. He announced via Twitter a few weeks ago that he was entering the transfer portal. So as we sit here today, there's only 3, potentially 4 players that are no longer on the team moving forward. So a lot of the players are going to be back, including some incoming freshmen. What are your initial thoughts, Paul?
Well, before getting into initial thoughts, I thought maybe we could pause and have kind of a Trent Thompson, Taylor Hawkins appreciation thread. Taylor Hawkins, of course, just finished the Hula Bowl, defensive MVP, had a pick 6 throughout the game. They kind of treated him like it was the regular season, meaning the quarterbacks weren't even looking in his direction. The opposition got a new quarterback in, immediately tried to test him, incomplete. And then, of course, the pick 6. And I don't think it's anything small what Taylor Hawkins was able to do this year, moving and replacing Darren Hall in the secondary. I mean, he was certainly Robin to Darren Hall's Batman in 2020, and his ability to move over and be that number 1 corner. It was huge. And they played throughout the season. They as the season, I guess, progressed, I should say, they definitely put him on the boundary side, kind of isolated and alone. And that because he's such a great tackler. And so his ability to play corner, he's probably got a puncher's shot at running a really good 40 from getting drafted because he's big and he's physical and all those things. And then you move to Trent Thompson, and I don't think anyone, including Kurt Maddox, believed that what he accomplished was possible. When we talked to him in the spring and in the fall, and we asked questions about replacing Tariq Thompson, it was, it'll be by committee. Not one player is going to play that safety who covers the kind of slot receiver. But as the season went on, that's what he did. Led the team in pass breakups. He was a first team all Mountain West, and he was just absolutely sensational for the Aztecs. So that appreciation aside, those props to those two players, who gave so much to the program their entire careers. Looking ahead to 2022, there's definitely going to be competition, but I think it looks like it to be in pretty good shape. CJ Baskerfield came on at the end of the year, obviously defensive MVP in the bowl game. And he looks like a football player. When he is out on the field, you notice him. He does not look like he was a true freshman. He's a tall, very athletic player. And then he replaced through injury. And then, even after he came back and looked at least healthy in warmups, Cedarius Barfield, who was the starting safety the entire time. So they look like at the Warrior safety, they should have a pretty good tandem there. Then you obviously still have Pat McMorris, who, as we've talked about, was arguably the MVP of the team's defense, even with all of the other great players around him. And then at corner, throughout the year, you had three corners who were fighting for playing time. And the kind of winner of that competition in practice and then being the person who would start was more often than not Noah Tumlin. But the person who was the most effective and played the most snaps was Dallas Branch. Then you have Noah Avenger, who as a freshman, true freshman at that, was really good. And so in Tumlin and Avenger, I think you have those two guys who are really long, very athletic, have pro potential if they can put it together. And then you have a very good corner in Dallas Branch, who was really good, clearly outplayed him. Those other corners would have won the job coming out of fall camp, if not for an injury. So you have experience all the way throughout. And it looks like just on the surface at the beginning that it could be in really, really good shape. And with the rest of the defense and the number of players returning, Kurt Maddox may have just reloaded this defense for 2022.
You totally agree that the secondary is in great shape. Patrick McMorris had a great season. If you recall, I voted for McMorris for team MVP in the EVT postseason awards. I was the only one. But I believe based on his coming to age as a first-time permanent starter and replacing, with secondary, trying to replace three starters, his play was vital to how the defense played all season. And I think he will continue that. Agree with CJ Baskerville. He had to wait a little bit. He got some limited playing time. Obviously, unfortunately, Barfield got injured in game 9, I believe. And Baskerville came in and pretty much took over that spot for the rest of the season. The replacing Trent Thompson will be interesting, whether Barfield slides over into that position, whether Rashad Scott, if he comes back. Rashad Scott was the backup to Trent Thompson all season on the depth chart. If he's back, are he and Barfield potentially battling out for that spot? The other guy that I would throw out there as a name that some Aztec fans may not readily identify is New Zealand Williams. He was a true freshman safety. He enrolled early last year in the spring. During spring camp, a lot of the coaches, were talking about him as someone to look out for. He didn't really get any playing time during the season, but he may be a guy that could step into at least maybe a backup role on the 2 deep at the Warrior positions or at the Aztec and potentially get some game action in there. The other, for corners, I agree. I think between Branch, Tumlin, and Avenger, those three are going to get the predominantly most of the snaps. If there's any guys we could look at potentially from the freshmen and redshirt freshmen, Jaden Brown, who didn't get any playing time this past season. He was a true freshman from Helix High School, highly recruited, potentially having him step in for a backup to either the boundary or the field corner position could be potential. So those are kind of some names to throw out there as potential backups moving forward.
Yeah, but moving back a little bit, tell us why Pat McMorris should have been the MVP of the defense and not Cameron Thomas.
Great question. I think Cameron Thomas was an all Mountain West player for 2 years coming into the season. We all knew what we were getting with Cameron Thomas. Cameron Thomas played with a senior defensive line next to Jonah Tavai, next to Keyshawn Banks. I think we all knew that the defensive line was going to be the strength of the team. The secondary was a concern, replacing 3 starters, one of which was drafted in the NFL, the other 2 which were, preferred free agents or priority free agents that got to training camps. It was a big concern, and I think McMorris, as a first-time starter, permanent starter, stepping in and doing what he did with 2 new starters next to him as well, I think was impressive, and it was why I considered him the most valuable player on the team. Not necessarily the best defensive player, because I think Cameron Thomas was that guy, but I would put McMorris as the most valuable to the success of the team based on how he played and how he manned that Aztec position, which is so crucial to how the 3-3-5 plays.
I think it was perfect, and I think that's absolutely valid, and could have easily went that way. I mean, it's a great argument. We all know Cam Thomas, like I said, potential first round pick. He's the best player, but absolutely, if you're doing it by who the team needed to step up, it was Pat McMorris. And it just did a whole bunch. I mean, his ability to allow Saguna Luby, who we talked to in episode 2, to be a linebacker and not have to waste time, because he just dominated the position. Kyron Wright was able to slide in behind him. And so that was really good. I am also very interested in how they're going to line up next year at the beginning of the season, when teams would go into 3 receivers. As we've talked about, Trent Thompson would be the person who would be covering them. If they went to 4, Barfield would be there, and McMorris would be the last safety who was there. When Baskerville came in after Barfield went down, McMorris actually slid over, and Baskerville was in the back, and he was like kind of the last safety back there. And so how they're going to decide to play that going forward and where their strength is going to be interesting. But I, the ground that Baskerville, even as a true freshman, could cover, and the more he gets comfortable with what opposing offenses are doing, the speed of the game, he'll be bigger and stronger and faster after, a full year of weight training. And so just a lot of excitement at that position.
Yeah. And the one thing we also haven't talked about necessarily is there's 4 incoming freshmen to the class of 22, 3 safeties, 1 corner, who will join the team in the fall, who it's tough to predict, whether they're going to be getting playing time or not, because, they haven't even, jumped on campus, but they're highly regarded, very talented players, especially the 3 safeties. And we just saw CJ Baskerville as a true freshman come in and play really well. So it'll be interesting to see who takes kind of the lead in spring camp of the people who are there, and then whether they will take that to another level, or any of these incoming freshmen in the fall can make up some ground. So that'll be really interesting to see. All right. Hopefully, Matt, we answered your question. Great question. Keep them coming. And we'll get to a couple more questions later in the episode. Our guest today is athlete Matt Araiza, who won the Ray Guy Award for the nation's best punter after breaking the FBS record with a 51.19 yard per punt average in 2021. He also broke the FBS record for most 50-plus and 60-plus punts in a season. Ariza became the second player in SDSU football history to earn unanimous first-team All-American accolades. He decided to forego his senior season and declared for the NFL draft earlier this month. Welcome, Matt, to the SDSU Football Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on.
So we're gonna start with the 2 most important questions everybody wants to know. First, on the night you won the Ray Guy Award, I asked you at the press conference when you thought you would be able to actually hold the trophy up. Do you have the trophy in your possession now?
I do not. Unfortunately, I still don't have it.
Any plans or ideas on when you will?
I was told sometime in January. So hopefully in about a week or two, I'll have it. That's when it's going to feel real for me. It still hasn't really sunk in. I want to have the trophy.
And then the second important question is, were you happy with your grade on the discrete math final?
I was. I mean, I ended up doing well in the class. I think I could have done better. It was pretty hard to focus that night with everything going on. Yeah, finals are always tough being a student athlete because you have to balance a lot of different things. So, especially dealing with practices, and then the ESPN award show and other classes and stuff, there wasn't too much time to study for it, but it's okay. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
And have you earned your degree already, or are you still finishing that up?
I have not. I'll finish up in May. I have 4 classes to go.
Matt, Coach Hoke was talking about like the respect that you have from the team. And he said the best way you could see it is you got a cool seat on the plane, not typically reserved for kickers. What was he talking about?
On the team plane, when we would travel to games or bowl games or anything like that, I sat in the exit row. So you have a little bit more leg space, which is usually reserved for O linemen or D linemen. I think I was the only guy in the exit row that was under 250 pounds. So I'll take it. It was nice. It wasn't something I asked for, but it's definitely, I'll take it. It was comfortable.
So I mean, take us through it. Is it there like this movie moment where Cam Thomas sees you across the plane and says, "Kicker, you can sit here"? I mean, how does one go about getting that seat?
It's not open seating. We have equipment staff, or not equipment staff, support staff that handles all of our planes and all that stuff. And when we show up to the building before meetings, before we would take off and travel somewhere, we get a little sheet that has our seat assignment for the bus and our seat assignment for the plane. So I really didn't know until I got onto the plane and sat down there for the first time. I was like, oh, wow, this is nice. Because as a true freshman, when I traveled, even though I didn't play my freshman year, I traveled to every game, and I was in the very back, squeezed in. So it was definitely a nice upgrade.
Did you have to pause and check to make sure you were in the right spot?
I think I might have actually looked back in my car like, why am I here?
Okay, so obviously, man, you have been everywhere, been interviewed all over the place. Next to talking with Andre and myself, what has been the coolest interview you've had the opportunity to do?
I think Rich Eisen stands out for me because that was my first big national one. That was really cool. I don't think I really even recognized how big it was until afterwards and saw everything on social media, but that one was definitely special to me. So
recently you declared for the NFL draft. What was the feedback that you got from the NFL that made you decide to leave early?
I would say it was mostly on me and where I felt I stood in my development. And the biggest reason was that I felt that I'm ready. I believe I'm ready to go and compete at that next level. And I think there's no better time to take that shot than now. I think with the way everything went this year, it was kind of the perfect timing.
And your announcement came a little bit after some other guys made their announcements. How much were you considering coming back for one more year to San Diego State?
I would say probably 3/4 the way through the year. I had just about made my decision, but I was more focused on just the season and making sure that I still had that opportunity. I wasn't going to get so locked up in that I was going to forget about the things that helped me perform the way I did and the focus and all that stuff. But I was pretty confident around then. And then I wanted to, when I was talking to the coaching staff about, what my decision would be, I wanted to go home and get away from football for a little bit, just to let the decision sink in and spend time around family and just be 100% sure, because it's a big decision. But I was pretty confident about 3/4 the way through the year.
You just mentioned the coaching staff. Who else helped you with that decision-making process? And, what was some of the advice that they were giving you?
Nick Novak has been a huge help to me. He's who I'm doing my training with here in San Diego. He's the head coach at Maranatha High School. And so that's where I've been training. And I had dinner with him probably, I'd say, week 10. And we just spoke about, my process, what his process was like. And I don't want to say got the green light from him, but when I told him, yeah, I feel like I want to declare, he was very supportive and ready to go.
Andre spoke with Dane Brugler from The Athletic a couple weeks ago, and he kind of said that what he's heard is kind of like 4th, 5th round, kind of those middle rounds for you. Is that something similar to what you've heard?
Yeah, that's about what I've heard. I've heard the process is basically the way it goes. If there's enough teams that are looking to take you, for example, in the 5th round, then one of those teams will step up that really wants you. Then you'll go to the 4th round. But then it just kind of keeps working like that, kind of a supply demand type thing. I'm not too worried about that right now. I like to just control what I can control 100%, whether a team wants to take me in the 7th or earlier. It's not really completely in my control. I'm ready to just go and work and compete for the job, no matter how that ends up happening.
You mentioned working with Nick Novak. How did that come about? How did you get involved with him, and what have you guys been doing specifically?
Mm-hmm. So he trains with one of our other kickers and punters, Jack Browning. They had kind of a pre-existing relationship, and one time I was on the field at State just working by myself, and he was there with Jack, and then he came over to me, introduced himself. I had met him once before because he's also friends with John Barron, and John Barron introduced me to him. And we just kind of started talking about field goals, stuff like that. And then we stayed in touch throughout the season. When I met him recently, that was summer prior to this last season. We just kind of stayed in touch, and kind of speaking to him, I just realized, he has the same passion for it as I do. And we watched some film together, and I just, I was ready to go with him and make sure that my training was with him. But things we have been working on is me changing into a little bit more of a pro style punter. That's not really a phrase that I think anyone has really ever said before. Maybe you hear that as quarterback, more of a pro style quarterback. Because at all levels, I would say a lot of punters really care about hang time. I think that's super important to success. I was kind of the opposite. I thought distance was a lot more important, and that proved to be true in high school, and that definitely proved to be true in college, because a lot of the returners weren't ready for it, and there was a lot of games where that style of punt changed the game, without question. Some of the times when we flipped the field position, it gave our defense a huge field, and the way our defense plays, that just changes the game. So, but in the NFL, you are punting to literally the most athletic people on earth. So you kind of have to give a little bit more hang time. And then on top of that, the way the schemes work in the NFL, your coverage guys can't get out as quick as they can in college, because you're allowed to do things like the shield style punt in college, which you can't do in the NFL. So there's a little bit more of a hang time requirement in the NFL, and that's been kind of our biggest focus. And I was really surprised at how fast I made that progress. I was really happy with that. Pretty much after the first 2 sessions, I got used to it. We did this drill with a second mobile upright where I would stand maybe 6 yards away from it when I was catching the ball, and I would try and punt it over it. So basically by the time I was planting, I maybe had 2 yards to the upright, and I had to get it over the bar. And that really helped me elevate the ball a lot more.
And looking back on the season, your 70 and 80 yard punts, your average was a lot higher in the first half of the season than the second half of the season. Would you attribute that to maybe working on your technique, more hang time, or is that just more of a consequence of, field position or things like that?
I would say there was 2 big factors to it. One was the field position. We have a defensive minded head coach. That's kind of just how it is. He was a D-line coach before he was the head coach here. And so when for him, when we're, on the 40, are we going to go for it on 4th down, like a lot of these other schools that are maybe more offensive minded schools are, or should we punt the ball and give our defense a big field to play with and then hopefully get the ball back? His choice more often than not was to punt the ball. So there were punts where the farthest I could possibly hit the ball was 38 yards. So that definitely, as those add up throughout the year, that definitely brings the average down. And I think the other key factor was kind of the publicity I had got. Then teams were starting to scheme for me. We saw that really big against Hawaii, where they had 2 returners to cover a really far punt. Whereas earlier in the season, before they realized that, I was hitting a lot more balls over their head. So I think those two things were probably the biggest effect on the average.
And then, you were one of four players who did all three kicking roles in college football. Do you see NFL teams giving you the opportunity to kick in all three at the next level, or you think you're going to be more of a punter, kickoff specialist in that regard?
I think it'll eventually happen. I think it'll follow somewhat how it had to happen in college, where I had to prove myself in one first. I definitely don't see a team going out there and taking a rookie and saying, hey, go do all three. That would be a lot, because at each level, there's stuff you need to learn and adjustments you need to make. And it would be a lot to have to make those adjustments for all three phases. But I do see down the road, I think I will eventually get my shot at it. And that's something I'm excited for.
Now, Matt, you played obviously for your hometown school, and you were part of the group that transitioned from, the old stadium and then obviously the new stadium next year. What pride do you take in being part of that group that not only was successful enough that led to the voters saying yes and awarding the university with it, but being able to continue that high level, given the fact that you didn't play any games in San Diego?
Yeah, it was a unique last 2 years. Definitely playing in Carson was an interesting thing. And the COVID year, obviously, was very interesting. But I'm just really proud of the way the team responded to everything. We played some very big games throughout the year, even when we were undefeated or maybe just had one loss, and we were only getting maybe 10,000 people there or 9,000 people there. Whereas if that game was in San Diego, you're talking about 45, 50,000 people. So it was a big difference in terms of the kind of fan support, just because of how far we were. It's not easy for the fans from San Diego to go up to LA every weekend or every other weekend. But I definitely think as the 99 team, we definitely set up the future teams for success. I mean, going 12-2, new stadium, we have another year like that, maybe one more year like that. Then we start getting in the conversation of possibly being that one group of 5 team in a national playoff. It would not surprise me at all to hear that SDSU plays in a playoff game in the next 10 years. I wouldn't be shocked one bit. I think this program is really close from hitting that national stage.
Yeah, definitely. You could add to that transitioning coaches, right? Going from Rocky Long to Coach Hoke and being able to bridge that as well. As a San Diegan, I think you probably have a better perspective on what this new stadium is going to mean to the city. What are some of your thoughts about the new stadium coming about and what it can mean to San Diego and then, of course, to the program?
Yeah, I'm just excited for everyone, for the fans, for the players. It's going to be really cool. I remember playing in Qualcomm that one first year, then watching the games from the sidelines my freshman year. Qualcomm was an interesting stadium because it was cool. It was an NFL stadium. It was massive. Being down on the field, I mean, it was absolutely huge. But even when we would get 30,000 people, it looked empty. So I think it'll be a really unique atmosphere when we have a stadium that fits our demand a little bit better. I think it's going to be really loud in there. And that might be something we haven't experienced at home games in a long time. But I think definitely it's going to be fun for the fans and for the players.
With your departure, obviously, that's going to open up, the place kicking and punting duties for the Aztecs next year. Can you give us kind of a quick, Matt Araiza scouting report of the guys who are behind you this year who could potentially take that role next year?
Mm-hmm. Well, to be honest with you, it's a lot about how they develop and how they perform in spring ball. I know when I was trying to earn the jobs, that was big. Another big thing is the way they work in the weight room and the way they work in the field during the runs. I think that was a big part in me earning all three. Was the coaching staff felt I showed that toughness in off-season workouts to be able to handle all three. And I think that's going to be very big for whoever ends up getting the job next. I have ton of confidence in all of them. Jack Browning can be great. David Delgado can be great. A lot of these guys can be great. I think I don't know if we have officially gotten anyone to commit to state as a kicker or punter, but I have faith Coach Deke and Coach Hoke will get everything handled, and there'll be another really successful year next year.
And during the season, you compared punting to hitting a golf ball, hitting a golf shot. How is your golf game?
My golf game is okay at best. I'll put it that way. I played growing up, not that much, to be honest with you. It was kind of a backseat sport for me, but it was something my dad and my brother loved. So it was good to go out and spend time with them on the course. It's definitely a fun game. It's something I'll pick up more down the road, but for now, my focus is on football.
I had a conversation with a coworker a couple of days ago, and they asked me if I played golf, and I said, I play enough to say that I play golf, but not enough to actually get better in golf. So,
yeah, exactly.
I think a lot of people fall in that boat. Do you have a favorite golf course in San Diego?
I'm gonna have to say the Crosby, because that's where I worked over the summer. It was a beautiful course, and it was a really cool opportunity to get to work there, play on that course once or twice a week, and I got to bring my dad and my brother out there a couple of times to play, which was cool. It's definitely a beautiful course.
And then you've also mentioned how, growing up, soccer was your first love and you wanted to become a professional soccer player. What position did you play in soccer?
I started off playing left back when I was younger. Then I moved to center back. Then I moved to left wing and then striker. So I kind of went through all of them. I think kind of as I got older, I became a little bit bigger as a soccer player, where when I was younger, I was kind of just an average size. So I was playing left back and left wing, but I never really had great stamina. So that's why I moved to striker. I think if I was to go back and play now, I'd probably play center back and just try and bully people.
Could you tell us a little bit about, you mentioned him before, but just Coach Deacon and just what is he like as a coach, and what does he bring to the program?
Energy, just straight up energy. He is, it's insane to me how he just brings this high level of energy and focus every day. You never see him tired. You never see him underprepared. You never see him under coaching, anything like that. He's just a really hardworking guy who truly found what he loves. So it's been awesome to work with him for the past 4 years. I wish him the best. I think he's going to keep moving up with this whole coaching thing. He's just a phenomenal coach and a great guy. And it was a blessing to kind of be around him for the past 4 years.
All right. One more football related question before some rapid fire, other stuff, non-football. I've seen plenty of football in my day, and I'm not sure I have ever heard a crowd cheer louder on a late hit out of bounds. And I will say, I almost got a perfect picture. It's just a touch blurry, but I got you right before you blow up the guy. So, I mean, just take us through that play. How could you not put the brakes on?
Yeah, I love this. I love this question. I've been kind of waiting to talk about this for a while. All right, so I believe this is the first punt of the game. Punt the ball, and I think part of also the publicity I have been getting for punting and also tackling as well. Some dude comes to block me pretty quickly after I punt. So we're wrestling for about 10 yards. I end up somewhat pancaking him, and then he pulls me down. And I see no one really saw this. Everyone paid attention to the hit. They never showed this on TV. Pancake him. He kind of pulls me down with him. I do a somersault. I get up. I see the guy looking to, like, he was going to break it for a touchdown. So then I just go full force, head of steam on. And maybe back when I played DB, I would have a better field awareness. But in the moment, I truly thought he was in bounds. So I can promise you that 100%. I didn't mean to hit him late. And then watching the replay, there was maybe 0.05, 0.1 seconds that he was out of bounds officially, because he had kind of jumped. So that flag frustrates me a little bit. But if you go back and watch the whole play from our film, where you can see the whole field, I think there's a little bit better understanding of how that happened, because I was definitely a little out of it, just getting picked up so soon and then doing a somersault and seeing him about to break it in a championship game. So definitely was an interesting play in my career. And I think the crowd, that was awesome. That was absolutely awesome. As much as the 15 yards hurt us, I'll take it. That was one of the most fun moments of my career, looking up and seeing everyone in the crowd's face. And my teammates watching it back on film, it was hilarious.
No, I mean, talking about respect, picking you up and, assigning a blocker to you that early, man, that's awesome.
Seriously. Yeah. That kind of caught me off guard.
All right, man. So not to catch you off guard, but we've got some rapid fire questions for you. Favorite food?
Mexican food.
Anything in particular?
Specific California burrito.
Nice. Okay, so I mean, this is a very important question for San Diego. Where's the best California burrito in San Diego?
Oh, that's really tough. I'll go with, I'm a Trujillo's guy, so we'll go with Trujillo's by campus.
Favorite movie or TV show?
Favorite TV show would be Game of Thrones.
And who were you going for?
Who was I going for in the end?
At any point?
I wanted Dany to keep the throne, and I didn't want her to die. I'll put it that way. Oh, spoiler alert! Sorry. Hopefully by now they have seen the show.
Right. I mean, it's already that point. We talked to Saguna Luby, and he had the same thing. Did you guys, watch the show together at any point?
No, that's funny. I didn't know that about him.
Yeah, but and his favorite character was Jon Snow. So you guys had you guys were like right there at the end together, and then had to break it up and divide it, man. I agree with you. I thought that was pretty weak.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're coming out with a new one this year or next year, where it's.
You know anything about that? I heard that rumor's out there, but I'm not sure the details.
It's they're not adding a new season. They're doing the same world, but 300 years in the past. Oh. So I'm excited for that. I mean, it's going to have a huge budget. It's going to be hopefully should be pretty good.
Heck yeah. What about favorite musical artist or group?
That's a tough one. Not huge on music. I would probably say my favorite, maybe J. Cole.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. How about favorite professional athlete?
Favorite professional athlete, Conor McGregor.
Wow.
That's we've asked this question now in a couple of weeks, and that is the second person who said Conor McGregor. Is that where the walk came from?
The walk. Explain. I'm confused.
Andre, what's the walk? Conor McGregor has the strut. Excuse me.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean,
brought that out on the field, right?
Not really. Not like the Cincinnati punter. I don't know if you saw that, but in the national championship or the semifinal, the 6'7" punter brought that out and kind of went viral on Twitter.
Okay,
not meaningful in any way. I didn't mean to do anything like that, but no, he's my favorite. He's my favorite athlete. I love what the confidence he brings and kind of everything he brings. And I mean, in the octagon, he's explosive and he's fun to watch.
No doubt. What about favorite hobby?
Favorite hobby, surfing.
Is that right? Where do you like to surf?
Mm-hmm. Tourmaline Park. It's a little bit north of PB.
Awesome, Matt. Those are our rapid fire questions, brother. Thank you.
Awesome.
Matt, we definitely appreciate you taking the time with us, joining us on the podcast. We look forward to seeing you get drafted and playing on Sundays.
Me too. Thank you guys very much.
So, Paul, what were your main takeaways from the Matt Araiza interview?
Well, I mean, the first thing that has to jump out is what a spectacular kid that guy is. I mean, his ability to take all of this insane fame in stride, right? And to do it with such grace and such humor. It was just a treat to be able to talk to him and be able to just see where he's at and see his mindset and see what he's going through. Some of my takeaways, I thought it was great. Just what we heard right at the very end, that Utah State was sending out blockers, that his prowess as a threat to tackle the bring down the ball carrier was so high that defenses schemed for him and sent him blockers right away. Right. I thought, I've never even heard of such a thing. And then that he was so excited after pancaking the would-be blocker that, he was just kind of in the moment and hit the guy out of bounds. And he even went and said that, the guy wasn't out of bounds very long. We'll definitely have to check the tape on that. So that was a big takeaway. I think, another big takeaway was him being able to talk about, some of those the first big major national interview, Rich Eisen, and just seeing that process for a local kid who was able to step in and truly become a national sensation. What about you?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that he mentioned that, he had kind of made up his mind about turning pro 3/4 of the season through. Obviously, he was still focused on playing and performing in the season. And then, after the season ended, he waited. He got away from football, spent time with family before he made before he made the final, yes, I'm going with this, and here's my announcement. So I thought that was interesting. A lot of players will just always say, oh, I didn't think about it during the season. And we all kind of know that that's not necessarily true. And I like the fact that he was, upfront about it. The other part was how he was talking about having to change his punting style from college to NFL, from being more in college about distance, but in the NFL being more about hang time, and then describing it because of the athletes in the NFL about how, you could kick it 60 yards, but that's not going to help your punt coverage team. And this world-class athlete is going to make a couple people miss and take it to the house, and how important that is. So those are things that he's already working on. He mentioned he was working with Nick Novak on some of that stuff. So I thought it was he's doing the right things, and he's going to keep working at it. And he's got 3 months until the NFL draft before we see where he ends up.
Yeah, no, I think that those are all great points. I mean, just that San Diego connection with Nick Novak, got to know him because of working with Jack Browning, and then Jack Browning being able to introduce them. And then, just the intricacies of some of that, like he needs to work on his hang time. So what does that look like? Well, it looks like kicking and having to get over a goalpost where you only have a short distance, and you're like, oh, that is so smart. And I would have never come up with something like that, to make it be able to get that higher hang time. And so I think it was encouraging how quickly he said that he's adjusting to that. And then I thought it was neat just how smart he is about his own game. And he could go back and talk about what he was doing when you asked him about, why his average went down in the second half. And he understood that teams were scheming for the way he was punting and trying to get it deeper. And now, like, they have two guys there, and that just changes and gives it a different dynamic. And he's not able to get it and have it roll over their heads and things of that nature. So just his professionalism in analyzing his own kicking, I think was pretty special too.
Yeah, let's answer two more follower questions that were related to Matt's interview. The first one is from Tom at Tom Aztec. Shout out to Tom. Who will be the kicker and punter next season? Obviously, we asked Matt, a scouting report on the guys coming back. He was very diplomatic about the guys that were on the roster last year. So who do you think has the lead for kicker and punter next year?
Okay, so this is an opportunity that I have to right a wrong. Last year, when I was talking about all of the kickers in camp, David Delgado from Hilltop High, South Bay guy, and I blanked and I missed him. And he was injured, and there was, I just blanked on him because he wasn't out on the field. And so I was really glad to hear Matt talk about David Delgado. Again, another local kid, and says that he has the ability to be great, right? Another local kid, Jack Browning, he mentioned him also by name. And so I think those are the front runners. Those are the two front runners. We know as we wrote articles and things like that they are looking at other kickers, trying to always bring in more competition. You have Colin Hopkins in the program, and all of their kickers did all of the different specialties. They all kind of followed Matt's thing, and they punted, they did kickoffs, etc. So I would guess that going into it, David Delgado would kind of be the leader, for kickoff or for field goals, I beg your pardon. And then Jack Browning for punter and for kickoff specialist would be, I would say, like who's starting there. Also, just another thing, if you have not had the opportunity to look at Jack Browning's like huddle and his all-star tapes or that they put out, it's really good. It'll make you feel pretty good about the position.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Browning was listed as the backup in all three kicking phases in the depth chart this year, but I don't think that they're going to have one guy do all three again this year. I think Matt did it because, he's a special talent, but I don't necessarily see one person doing all three. So I do agree with what you said with Browning and Delgado. Hopkins is interesting because he was a 5-star punter and kicker from Illinois. I think he was ranked the 13th best kicker in the 2021 class. You and I have got to games in Carson early and would see all three kickers, booting 60-yard field goals with ease, So we know all three of these guys have strong legs and can kick it. It's going to come down to accuracy, who can make it through those two yellow uprights, inside the yellow uprights. I think they all have strong legs, but it's going to come down to who can be the most accurate, especially when it comes to field goal kicking.
Yeah, and I think those will be some of the highlights of spring camp because the coaches are going to want to put these guys into pressure situations. And the best way to put them into pressure situations is to give them kind of fun games that really hold weight. If they make this 55-yard field goal, this team will win versus this team, or they're going to find different ways to get them to have those pressure situations. But shout out Tom, is a great question. And I think that, Matt answered it best that Browning and Delgado are the guys to be looking at.
And then our last question, follower question we're going to answer comes from Joel. His Twitter handle is at SDSU alum 2003. And the question is Snapdragon Stadium too big, too small, or just right? Now, the reason we saved this for Matt is because we asked Matt about, a new stadium and things like that. And one thing he said that was very interesting is at Qualcomm Stadium, when there'd be 30, 35,000 people in attendance, he still felt like the stadium was empty. And I think that's a great way to answer this question, that I think it's just right. It's definitely not too big, because I think on some of their best attendance numbers you can get, especially with a brand new stadium, you can get 30,000 people at the game. And I think it's definitely not too big. And based on how Matt answered it, I would say that it's not too small, that it's just right. Because if you build a 55 to 60,000 seat stadium and you're only getting 35, then you're still getting into that feeling, the stadium is still half empty, right? And I think so. My answer is I think the stadium is just right in size. What do you think, Paul?
Well, I mean, again, these kind of judgment things, I always like to put them into the context of how you can answer it. And Soccer City gave its proposal to the city of San Diego, to the community, to the voters first. And so they were talking about a soccer stadium that also had football involved in it, the San Diego State football. And they had to propose some sort of soccer venue. And as you see, soccer teams are already planning to be part of Snapdragon Stadium. Knowing that they were trying to give their own version to the voters of what a soccer stadium would be, you have to have it be small enough that a soccer team would want to be there. So I think that that's probably, first of all, the biggest component. I think the second part of it is, if you look at a team like TCU, and when TCU joined the Big 12, their stadium was about the size of what Snapdragon is going to be. And so then as the money from the bigger conferences came in, they were then able to add and do different expansions. The expansion for only numbers that I've heard, like for an NFL team, is very, very it's probably pretty problematic for San Diego State to do. but they don't have to do what an NFL team would do. They can do that and add seats in a different way. I think the other really important part of this is finding that perfect match to be able to maximize revenue. And to be able to maximize revenue, you have to be able to charge higher prices, and you have to create some sort of demand. So again, I think the stadium is very, very good size. I also think that what the stadium is going to be able to do because of the size is it's going to be able to kind of bridge the gap between watching a game at home and watching it in the stadium. And by that, I mean, because there's going to be less people, they're going to be able to have great Wi-Fi throughout. They're probably going to have, and that's what all the stadiums do. They have like the app where you can like watch the replays on the app and right away, multiple different replays, order your food, see where the bathroom lines are, all that stuff on an app, which is like what they have at like Levi Stadium and, and all of those places. And so I think that experience, partnering with Qualcomm plus the size of the stadium, is going to make probably the most unique football viewing experience inside of the stadium anywhere. And with all of those factored in, the stadium is a little bit too small. But all those, there's so many positives that, I get why you wouldn't risk building a little bit of a bigger stadium in that like 45 region to make sure that SDSU was able to have all of the land. But, at the same time, if this stadium is sold out, and it can be rocking and it can be loud, and the decibel level, I think, one of the highest decibel levels ever out of it was a soccer stadium, I think in Istanbul, and it broke the decibel record because everybody was going crazy together. So it's going to be plenty loud when Aztec Nation is supporting the team that way. And they definitely can create that home field advantage. And hopefully it's for the team and for the recruiting and for the city. It's going to be like the best days of Viejas Arena every single time the Aztecs go on there. And I will say, going back to episode 1, the new recruits coming in are very, very excited to being able to play in not only the newest stadium, but, one of the newest stadiums in the last 20 years. I mean, teams just don't build new stadiums, and these kids are going to get that opportunity.
Yeah, just to add to the discussion, as a side note, non-football related, the San Diego Wave FC, which is a new pro women's team starting in March, is going to move in and play their home games at Snapdragon Stadium. So I think the size is also going to build the atmosphere that a professional, women's soccer team also wants to build as well. So that's something to consider when you're kind of weighing, size, benefits, disadvantages, things like that. That's going to do it for this episode. Paul, any last words?
Just want to thank you for listening. Thank you for the positive feedback. Please subscribe. Please, leave a review of the podcast. Just kind of, we're trying to build this, and the more we can build it, the better off, the more we'll be able to do this. So thank you for the support. And Andre, it's been fun, man.
Yep. Thank you again, listeners, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. You are listening to the SDSU Football Podcast, presented by the East Village Times, with your hosts Andre Hagverdian and Paul Garrison.